This 1871 photograph looked like a farewell until experts zoomed in on the girl's eyes. The basement archive of the Boston Historical Society smelled of old paper and dust that had settled for decades. Dr. Emma Richardson pulled another cardboard box from the metal shelf, her fingers leaving trails in the grime. It was her third month cataloging the Victorian photograph collection, and most days blurred into an endless stream of stern faces and faded sepia tones. This particular box had been mislabeled, marked as agricultural equipment, 1880s, but filled with family portraits. Emma sighed, making a note to update the database. She lifted each photograph carefully, her cotton gloves gentle against the fragile surfaces. Then she saw it. The daguerreotype was smaller than most, roughly 4 by 5 inches, housed in a deteriorating leather case. A young girl sat rigidly in an ornate wooden chair, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a white dress with lace collar, her dark hair parted in the middle and pulled back. On either side stood a man and woman, both dressed in black, their faces carved with grief. Emma recognized it immediately, a memorial photograph. What Victorians called a sleeping portrait. Families would pose with their deceased loved ones, creating a final image to preserve their memory. The practice seemed macabre now, but in an era of high childhood mortality and no other way to capture a face, it had been an act of desperate love. She turned the frame over. Written in faded ink on the back, "Sarah, our angel." March 15th, 1871, scarlet fever took her from us. Emma set the photograph under her desk lamp and reached for her magnifying glass. Something about the girl's face drew her attention. The eyes were closed, as expected in these portraits, but there was something odd about the shadow patterns across her features. She adjusted the lamp angle and leaned closer. Then she stopped breathing. In the reflection of the window behind the family, barely visible in the glass, was the silhouette of a fourth person, someone who shouldn't have been there. Emma's hand trembled slightly as she positioned the photograph under the museum's digital microscope. The device, acquired just last year, could capture details invisible to the naked eye and magnify them up to 50 times their original size. She centered the image on the girl's face and began to zoom. The girl's features emerged with startling clarity. The daguerreotype process, an early form of photography using silver-plated copper, captured extraordinary detail when properly preserved. Sarah's face appeared peaceful, her skin pale, her expression serene. Everything about the image confirmed what the inscription claimed: a child at rest, photographed in death. But then Emma zoomed in on the eyes, her breath caught. The eyelids, which had appeared fully closed at normal magnification, were actually slightly parted, just barely a millimeter gap that would be invisible without modern technology. And through that gap, the girl's pupils were visible. More impossibly, they were focused. Emma pulled back from the screen, her heart hammering. In death, eyes relaxed completely, pupils dilating, all muscle tension gone. But Sarah's pupils were constricted, the way living eyes responded to bright light, the way a photographer's flash powder would have caused them to react. She zoomed in further, focusing on the reflective surface of the pupils themselves. Daguerreotypes captured everything, including tiny reflections. It was one of the remarkable qualities of the medium. In Sarah's right pupil, barely discernible but undeniably there, was the reflection of a standing figure. Not the photographer, who would have been behind the camera, but someone else. Someone standing to the left side of the frame, out of the photograph's main composition. Emma captured the digital image and enhanced it. The figure was male, tall, wearing what appeared to be a dark suit. His posture suggested he was watching intently. She grabbed her notebook and began writing furiously. The implications were staggering. If Sarah's eyes had been open during the exposure, if her pupils had reacted to light, then she had been alive when this photograph was taken. But why would a family photograph a living child as though she were dead? Emma spent the next morning in the records room, pulling everything she could find about memorial photography practices in 1870s Massachusetts. The library's collection included several journals from the era, advertising circulars from photography studios, and most importantly, a ledger from the Boston Photographic Society listing member photographers and their specialties. Memorial portraits had been common but controversial. Some clergy condemned them as morbid, while others saw them as comforting. Photographers who specialized in these portraits had developed specific techniques, propping the deceased in chairs, painting open eyes onto closed lids in the final print, or in rare cases, using thin wires to hold the body upright. None of the techniques explained focused pupils. She found a name in the ledger that made her pause. Thomas Garrett, studio located on Beacon Street, specialty listed as memorial and family portraiture. An annotation in different handwriting, added years later, noted, "Studio closed abruptly. 1872, whereabouts unknown. Emma photographed the page with her phone and then searched the city directory archive. Garrett's studio had been at 147 Beacon Street, now occupied by a modern office building, but the historical property records might still exist. By noon, she had the building's history. The photography studio had operated from 1868 to 1872, then the space was sold to a textile merchant. The sale documents noted, abandoned property, previous tenant departed without notice. Emma's phone buzzed. Her colleague David, who specialized in Civil War history, responded to her earlier message, found something interesting. There was a Sarah Miller, age 12, died March 1871 in Concord. Parents were James and Catherine. But here's the strange part. There's a second death certificate filed 6 months later, claiming administrative error on the first one. Never seen that before. Emma stared at her phone screen. 2 death certificates. One in March, one in September. She pulled up the daguerreotype image on her laptop and zoomed in again on that mysterious reflected figure. Who was he? And why had he been there when this photograph was taken? The Concord Public Library's genealogy section occupied a quiet corner on the second floor, where afternoon light filtered through tall windows. Emma spread her materials across a wooden table, printouts of the death certificates. Her enhanced images of the daguerreotype and a notepad already filled with questions. The librarian, an elderly woman named Patricia, brought over 3 boxes. Everything we have on the Miller family. They were farmers originally, owned land near Walden Pond. The family line died out in the 1920s, but there are some descendants through the maternal side. Emma opened the first box carefully. Inside were letters, land deeds, and a family Bible with birth and death records inscribed in the front pages. She found Sarah's entry. Born April 3, 1859. Died March 15, 1871. But beneath it, someone had attempted to scratch out the death date, leaving the paper rough and damaged. The letters proved more revealing. Catherine Miller had written to her sister in Philadelphia throughout 1871. Emma found the March letter first. Our darling Sarah has taken ill with the scarlet fever. The doctor holds little hope. James is beside himself with worry. We have called for the photographer should the worst come to pass. But then, dated April 30th, Sarah improves slowly. The crisis has passed, though she remains weak. The doctor is puzzled, as he had pronounced her beyond saving. James believes it is a miracle. Emma's hands shook as she photographed each letter. Sarah had survived. So why had the memorial photograph been taken? Why had her parents posed as mourners beside a living child? She found another letter, dated September 12, 1871. We have made the terrible decision. Sarah will go to live with James's brother in Ohio. Here, everyone believes her dead. It is the only way to protect her. The truth would destroy us all. Patricia appeared beside the table. Finding what you need? Emma looked up. Do you know if there are any living descendants? Anyone who might have family stories? There's a woman in Cambridge, Helen Foster. Her great-great-grandmother was Catherine Miller's niece. She's done extensive family research. I can give you her contact information. Helen Foster's apartment overlooked the Charles River, its walls covered with framed family photographs spanning generations. She was 73, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a historian's careful way of speaking. She set a teacup in front of Emma and settled into a worn armchair. My grandmother told me the story when I was 16, Helen began. She made me promise never to write it down, never to tell the historical societies. She said some secrets should stay buried. Emma leaned forward. But you're willing to tell me now? Everyone who could be hurt is long dead. And perhaps it's time the truth came out. Helen pulled a small wooden box from the bookshelf behind her. Inside was a stack of letters tied with faded ribbon. These were Catherine's letters to my ancestor, her niece Mary, the ones she couldn't risk sending through regular mail. Emma's heart raced as Helen untied the ribbon and selected a letter dated June 1871. Helen read aloud, Mary, I write to you in desperation and in secret. You know that we announced Sarah's death in March? The funeral was attended, the grave marked. But Sarah lives. She recovered from the fever, but in her delirium, she spoke truths that endangered us all. She saw things during her illness, things that happened in this house, things that James did during the war that he swore never to reveal. Emma interrupted. What things? Helen continued reading. James served as a field surgeon for the Union Army. In the final months of the war, he was captured by Confederate forces and held in a prison camp. To survive, to secure medicine for dying men, he made arrangements with a Southern doctor arrangements that involved providing information about Union troop movements. He saved lives, but it was still treason. If Sarah's fever-ridden confessions reached the wrong ears, James would be hanged. The words hung in the air. Emma understood now why a family would stage a death, would photograph their living daughter as a corpse. They sent her away? Helen nodded. To Ohio, to James's brother. She lived under a different name, married, had children. My grandmother descended from Sarah's daughter. The second death certificate? James filed it to make everything official, to close any questions. He claimed the first one had errors. Emma